Good afternoon, everyone. And I can't seem to hear anyone. Dave, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Bonner Property here. We can hear you.
Okay, and for now I can hear you guys. Fantastic. Well, we'll call a meeting to order and we'll begin with a land acknowledgement. Missoula County acknowledges that this event takes place on the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. We'll continue with a Pledge of Allegiance here. Thank you so much, Violet. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And any public announcements? Nope, okay. Public comments on items not on the agenda. And our current claims list as of January 5th, 2022 to January 18th, 2022 totals $2,835,178.81. We have 4 public hearings today. We'll begin with the Elstead Family Transfer. This is a reminder to myself. We'll begin with a staff report, and then the applicant and developer will speak, and then there'll be public comment. We'll close public comment, and then commissioners will discuss. Okay, well, Matt Heimel.
All right, good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Matt Heimel with Missoula County Community Planning Services. Sorry if you hear any background noise. There's a truck doing something outside my window, but hopefully it's at a minimum, whatever noise comes through. So this is a request from Brian and Andrea Elstad to use the family transfer exemption, which is a division made outside of platted subdivisions for a single gift or sale to each member of the landowner's immediate family. So I have a presentation to go through. First, I will do a screen share, and I just have a few images to show where the property is. Okay, so this first image just shows broad aerial image. The property is in the lower left-hand side of the screen, highlighted in the green line. We're southwest of Lolo. So the property is located at 13400 Balsam Root Road. It's also just south of Highway 12 and south of West Fork Lolo Creek. And now, okay, here is a closer aerial image just showing the current conditions for the property. So again, Balsam Root Road running through the property. There's one existing single-family residence on the southeast portion of the lot or tract. There's a driveway leading to that from Balsam Root Road. And then the north portion of the property is undeveloped. The McClay irrigation ditch is running through the northern portion of it. That's the shaded line that you see running across the upper portion. And then Lolo Creek is to the northwest of the property. There's a little bit of floodplain on the northwest corner, but the creek does not flow through. And here's just zoomed out a little bit, giving more perspective to the immediate vicinity. The property is unzoned, and it's located in an area described in the 2002 Lolo Regional Plan. That plan designates it with a open and resource land use designation, which is 1 dwelling unit per 40 acres. And the proposal is to create one new tract. So here's another image showing the existing tract with one existing home. And then this image shows the proposed layout. So the proposal is to create one new tract on the northern portion. That will be about 17.8 acres to be gifted to the claimant's 78-year-old mother. We review subdivision exemptions against generalization criteria to determine if there is a evasion from subdivision review. In staff's review of this request, we did note that there were a few evasion criteria that were triggered. So one, this did appear to be made for speculation based on there not being clear intent for the recipient to reside on the transfer tract. It also is not in substantial compliance with the growth policy, given that the resulting density would be 1 unit per approximately 13.85 acres. It is within 1 mile of Zone AE floodplain, and there were some other impacts or subdivision impacts that we noted. So one of our evasion criteria has to do with if there are potential for impacts that could lead to significant conditions of approval or denial of an equivalent subdivision request. And in this, we noted that wildfire risk, slope and hillside, riparian area, potential for high groundwater, and agricultural water use facilities are all factors that could lead to that. So with that, I do have some questions for the applicant. We have standard family transfer questions if the applicant is available.
Absolutely.
Okay, could you please state your name for the record?
Brian Elliston.
Okay, thank you. So I have 5 questions. The first is, did you buy the property with the intent of dividing it?
We did not. We purchased about a little over 11 years ago, and we're not planning on subdividing at that time.
Okay. Second question, do you or your transferees intend to transfer the property within the next year?
We do not. My mom does not.
Okay. Third question, have you talked to anyone at the county about going through subdivision review?
So I probably called the general number and talked to somebody in the planning department probably a year and a half or a year ago. Just asked general questions, didn't get into any details, was just kind of curious about the process. And then through casual conversations, I guess, with Shane Stack, and I don't even know if he was a county employee at that time. We're talking about, what I was going through, and he suggested I dig into the family transfer. It sounded like more of what I was looking for. So from there, I contacted Daniel at IMEG and to see if it was something that would fit what I was looking for. And so yes, I did contact the county, but we did not go into details. And I just then dug into further to see if this would be a more suitable item, and it seemed to fit all the parameters, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, I will just add to confirm, we did have a phone call, but that was a very general inquiry about the nature of subdivisions. There is a criteria about whether there has been a scoping or pre-application meeting, and there has not. So that's not included in the staff report. So my fourth question is, will the property be developed?
The intention would be to put a single family home there.
Okay, thanks. And my final question is, will the recipient of the property be residing on the property?
Yes, the intent is that my mom would build a house and live there.
Okay. That concludes my presentation on the questions. So commissioners, in our review, we did find that there does appear to be intent to evade subdivision, so staff is recommending denial of this request. And with that, I can take any questions. And I did receive some information from Dan Foltz with IMEG, and I know he'll be able to present that, but if not, I have that information to bring up as well.
Okay, Dan from IMEG, or I don't see Dan.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
I can either present the information I have about the site. That would probably be, I think, probably the best thing. Dan Foltz from IMEG, helping represent Brian Ellisted in the project for the record. All right, looks like I'm getting permission to share right now. Everyone see this exhibit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as Matt said, some of the evasion criteria was about slopes and floodplains and groundwater and things that would cause issues gaining approval through subdivision. So we had topoed the site, surveyed the site for Mr. Elistad, and kind of worked on a layout for him of where he wanted to build. And I just thought this exhibit would kind of shed some light on some of those concerns about slope and floodplain and groundwater that weren't provided in the original app because we hadn't done this work yet. So if I zoom in here, you can see the area that's being proposed for the single family house for Brian's mom is located in this area right here. One of the concerns in the staff report was the floodway and the AE floodplain, and that the potential that this division would allow additional access into that riparian area or floodplain area. The building site is located approximately 100 feet higher than the floodplain. And so even though this isn't a detailed map floodplain, there's no real access to this area of the property because of the steep slope kind of far below the building site. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there on record as additional information. The other thing was about impacts to agricultural watering features. So there is a ditch on the property, but that ditch is, again, well below the site, and it's below a steeper face on the property. And that ditch is 89 feet below the build site. So again, I don't think any building on this site would impact that agricultural facility or the floodplain in any way. And then lastly, slopes. I'm noticing that the label on this is a little incorrect. This is not Balsam Root Road. This is a driveway in an easement across Brian's property. That's for the neighbor. But this driveway was mapped at approximately 2% slope. So pretty low slope for the driveway. The proposal would be to bring Brian's mom's driveway off of that existing road. And what you see here is a slope category map. So everything in green is less than 20% or 25% slope. Everything in red is, or pink is greater than 25%. And that is the threshold in subdivision regulations where, you know, there's cause for concern and no build zones. So the approximate building site is around 16% slope. So 10 to 16% in this area. So I just thought that was good information for you guys to have, and to acknowledge that Matt didn't have that information when he wrote the staff report. So
Thank
and I'm
you.
here for any more questions if you have it.
And Brian, did you want to add anything?
So I guess the things I would add is, you know, there is no intent to evade anything on my behalf. I'm just trying to set something up for my mother, kind of trying to work within the process. And we actually have some examples on our road of, you know, family members living close to each other. There was one that's, you know, fairly close. You may have seen a little carve out lot that was on a map earlier that Matt showed. You know, it's like 1.5 acres. So when those people, they lived on the road prior to me moving in. It was a mother and a daughter, the Sellers family. And, you know, they have since moved off. I don't know if she passed or if they just moved, but they put both properties up for sale. And what that did actually was it created 2 modest homes for sale on our road. And those homes now are, have breathed some life into our road. We have 2 small family, 2 young, both couples have 2 young kids that did not exist when we moved in. So what we're trying to do here is create, number one, take care of my mom, have something close where I can take care of her without dealing with assisted living. And then at some point, yes, you know, this will be a home that will go out in the market, which I think will be a nice home for future families. You know, it's a 17-acre lot, much bigger than the lots that we currently have next to each other. You know, I border 6-acre lots, a 12-acre lot, and an 1.5 acre lot. So I think it fits in within our community. I did do a little more research on ADUs after this last week, because I had not considered it previously. And I just think that's, looking at our bylaws, I think that would create more issues within our neighborhood. I know our neighborhood very well, and our neighbors would not appreciate having, if an ADU is on this standalone lot, more than likely, and someday it'd turn into more of an Airbnb, and our neighborhood would not appreciate Airbnb traffic. They'd much rather have a single family home on this land than potentially a future ADU. So, I'm happy to answer any questions. My current house is not elderly friendly. There's way too many stairs. It's a 3-level house, a garage in the basement, and 1,100 square feet on each floor, but there's steps on the main floor just to get to the main bathroom. So there's way too many trips and falls. So it's not really an option for me to move my mom into our current house. The topography up at our house is not conducive for another standalone ADU. So that's why this just seemed like the more realistic option here, is to split off and create a single family home to keep her independent. So happy to answer any questions.
And where does your mother live now?
She currently lives in Decorah, Iowa. I'm the only child, and the rest of her family has moved away, so there's nobody there to take care of her. She is very good health right now. She wants to maintain independence, but realizes in the next 2 years she's going to have to move out here. So the plan was to do the split, put in a road this summer, and build in summer 2. So that was kind of our plan, that we work together if this goes through.
And Matt, can you zoom out a little bit just to see the development pattern?
So we
Sure.
kind of tried to go out of our way to make a square lot versus, I see a lot of family transfers that are checkerboard, or, we just wanted to make sure that whatever we did fit in the nature and the character. So I hope you see that we kind of went out of our way to make sure we just square it off and fit within the nature of what you're seeing there.
And I'm confused. Is there a homeowners association here, or when you were talking about neighborhood bylaws, what? I don't understand.
So we have a declaration of restriction and protective covenants is what we fall under, is what our subdivision or our neighborhood has, and a general road agreement.
And I'm sorry, what's the neighborhood? What's considered the neighborhood?
It'd be Balsam Road, I would assume. I don't have it with me. I just have some notes that I just know. It says declaration of restrictions and protective covenants on the front cover.
Thanks. Dave?
I have some questions, but if you want to take public comment first, we could do that.
Okay, is there any public comment? I don't believe I see any. Okay, is there any public comment? Press *6 if you're on the phone. Okay, well then we'll close public comment. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, yeah, a few questions. Dan, so maybe this is a question for you. Could you right now, just by way of getting a building permit, construct the dwelling unit that you're contemplating for Brian's mother? Is there any obstacles to just going out and on the single parcel building what's being proposed?
Yeah, good question, Dave. The current tract is over 20 acres, so it does not have a DEQ sanitation approval. So any septic and well permitting would have to be done through Missoula County Health Department. And then, as you said, building permits, and then you'd get a land use, compliance review through that building permit. But being unzoned, I don't see any hurdles to actually obtain a building permit on this site without a division. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. And Brian, when you mentioned ADU, were you thinking in terms of the dwelling unit that you're proposing being considered an ADU by way of your covenants?
So into the weeds. So the covenants are obviously outdated. 79 ADUs looks like it came on the books in 2009. But there's some language in our covenants that say that if state and local laws change, you have to take the most restrictive of them all and incorporate them. So ADU, in my mind, shows like a 600 square foot max, and our covenants say you have to have at least a 1,250 square foot dwelling on the property. So I'm not a lawyer, I don't know.
So I guess where I'm going with this is I'm assuming your home is the size that you mentioned, greater than 1,200 or so square feet, and that that the home that you're contemplating building for your mother would exceed 600 square feet, regardless of where it's located on the property. So the question then is, would that simply by virtue of the fact that it's on the one parcel as opposed to sitting on its own lot be in violation of the covenants? And I see Matt raised his hand, so maybe he has an answer to something.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that while we're talking about accessory dwelling units, an extra house or dwelling unit on this property we would see as just a additional dwelling unit. Typically, accessory dwelling units come with some sort of zoning restriction about size limitations, but those would not apply here. So there's no limit for county zoning or county regulations that say it has to be a certain maximum area. I just wanted to point that out for clarification.
So there's no, you can just, Brian could just build his mother's house there, right?
Well, I guess the question is, even though it would be totally fine per Missoula County regulations, does the more restrictive definition of perhaps the more restrictive definition of a accessory dwelling unit in the covenants create problems?
It's not clear to me on that, so I don't want to speak out of turn on that. I think the bigger issue is to build a second property on an existing, you're just pricing, instead of trying to lower values and create equity in a community that's already got a very expensive housing. Now you're doubling properties and making it just out of price for most people in the future. I mean, adding a second dwelling just does not seem, yeah, it's great. We can build a house there, but it's, you're pricing, you're overpricing a piece of property than what it should be, in my opinion.
Well, although Brian, I guess within the context of our decision making, we don't want to stray too far from beyond the immediate transaction. So our decision today really has nothing to do with how this will play out in future transfers. It's strictly trying to provide a benefit to a family member. So I guess the other question I have would be, and Matt, Dan, Brian, any of you, are there any other boundary lines within this parent tract that could be relocated to create a separate parcel? Because that's another consideration, as we've seen this before, where we do the family transfer only to find out after the fact that there is actually another boundary line that then gets rejiggered at a future date, creating yet another lot. So.
Yeah, Dave, I'll take that. Our surveyors did not identify any other tracts of records when they were looking at the boundary survey and performing this mapping. So to our knowledge, there's no other internal tracks out here. So hopefully that answers the question. So.
Yeah, and based on topography, yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with Daniel on that.
Okay.
And Matt, do you have a response to the new information that Fultz shared?
Yeah, so I guess the only thing would be that in my staff report on page 3, I stated that a building site has not been identified. So the new information would be identification of a building site. However, there are other issues stated in the staff report that are still applicable. So it does not change staff's recommendation.
Although I guess mitigating that would be the fact that it seems like you could just go out there and do what's being proposed right now without the division of the property. And presumably if there are problems with the either sanitation or otherwise, those might be picked up. I guess this is always the question for us in these sorts of scenarios, is what residual impacts would not be identified either through the subdivision exemption here or through the building permit or sanitation review. And if there are serious problems or potential problems that would not be picked up in either of those processes, that's where it's a kind of borderline for approving family transfer like this. But I'm not, it's not jumping out at me immediately that there would be something of that acute nature. The other thing I'll just throw in as far as the Matt, could you pull up the schematic again that shows the property information system map that shows the adjoining lots? So, yeah, I'm always concerned when we deviate too far from the land use designations in the growth policy. In this case, it looks like there's probably adjoining this parcel smaller lots than what's being proposed as part of the division here. So it's not, again, it's not when put in context radically different from the development pattern adjoining it.
And is it public land, Matt, to the south of this property?
Yes, that's correct.
So the other thought, I guess, just to throw in here for consideration is if it were the case that it was a 78-year-old parent gifting a parcel to one of that individual's children, maybe we would, but I don't think we have in the past asked the question of whether the parent would simply build some homes on the parent lot for their kids without going down the family transfer path. We would just, I think we've always just assumed that severing it off would make sense. So it's just kind of the reverse in this scenario. So while probably from my standpoint, the least complicated path forward would be to simply build the additional dwelling unit on the one tract, I don't know that there's anything different about this than many of the other family transfers that we've contemplated, where it was typically a parent gifting a parcel to a child.
You know, at the end of the day, I guess I'm not, sure what to tell you. I mean, obviously, Matt has done a good job, and based on that, the application, it's very hard to put items into an application that kind of tell the real world or the intent of what your plans are. Obviously Matt did what he needed to do. It clearly says, that it looks like I'm trying to evade subdivision rules. That's definitely not the intent. I mean, there's, the intent is exactly what I'm saying, is just trying to create a lot for my mom to build a house so she can be self-supportive, and, you know, I can do the snow, cut her, you know, have her close and do what sons do. You know, I'm not trying to make a quick buck off of this. I'm just trying to, you know, create a house that, in my mind, a 17-acre lot more than fits in with the nature of this neighborhood. So anyway, but.
Thanks. Juanita, I have one more question
Yeah, go
for
ahead.
John Hart. Hey, John, are you out there?
Yep.
Given the number of family transfers we've had lately, I should know this stuff by heart now, but pardon the pun. But John,
And John's our deputy county attorney. Sorry, Brian.
yes, our esteemed deputy county attorney, John.
Yes.
In terms of the potential recipients of a parcel and a family transfer, could you refresh our memory as far as what kind of orbit of family members can be the recipient of a parcel of land?
So it's an immediate family member that the code defines as your spouse, your children, including children by adoption, and your parent. That's the orbit. So it doesn't include siblings, you know, cousins, things like that. It's pretty much straight up and down the line.
Okay, thank you. I think I feel relatively comfortable in approving this.
Same. I guess so. Matt and John Hart. Like, if this were approved, what heartburn do you guys have?
You keep making puns about my name.
Heartburn.
Totally unintentional, but I'll take it. Yeah.
Legally, I don't have any heartburn. And I say legally because that's the opinions that I express. From a you know, standpoint of good policy, what seems to be the right thing to do given the intent of the Subdivision and Platting Act, I don't have any heartburn either.
Matt?
No heartburn from me, commissioners. I just recommend that if you approve it, make sure in that motion maybe state a short basis or conclusion to that effect based on the Platting Act and our regulations.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm ready for a motion. Matt, I'll modify it on the fly. Let's see here. Okay, gotta love the passive tense. So I would move that the request by Brian and Andrea Elstad to utilize the family transfer exemption as presented in the subdivision exemption affidavit and based on testimony of the applicant and deliberation of the commissioners,
And
be
our
approved.
esteemed deputy county attorney. I second that.
That sounds fine. I mean, you could throw in that you don't find that it's an attempt to evade subdivision review based on the applicant's testimony, facts and evidence presented by the applicant's representative, and, you know, and also information presented in the staff report, because there were many criteria that showed that there was not an attempt to evade a subdivision review.
That is exactly the motion that I had intended. So if from the recording you could work that in and piece that back together, that would be great.
And I second that worked in motion. Is there any further comment? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
No, thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for your time on this and all the work you staff did. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, I have lost the agenda, but I see Nick.
Yes, I am up next with the O'Keefe Creek Boat and RV storage expansion, and I will share my
Building
screen.
for Lisa Rent project. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Similar to Matt, there's a lot of construction going on around, so please let me know if it gets too distracting, and I will try to limit the noise. But yeah, so this is the O'Keefe Creek Boat and RV storage expansion. This is a Bflr project. Starting with a quick background, the project is located about 1.25 miles west of the Y. It is between Highway 10 West and I-90. It is accessed off of a private drive coming from Highway 10. You can see it in the upper left-hand corner here in red. This project probably sounds familiar. The original O'Keefe Creek Boat and RV storage was approved by the BCC on September 24th, 2020. That original approval was for 280 covered parking spaces, 271 uncovered parking spaces, and 1 shop with living quarters. Now getting into the applicant's proposal for their expansion, the expansion would include 92 covered spaces in 3 buildings, 2 buildings with 38 parking spaces, and 1 building would include 16 parking spaces. Now getting into agency comment, the project was sent out to agencies across Missoula. The health department commented that the project must go through sanitation review or cite an applicable exemption. The Montana Department of Transportation commented that they have not received an approach permit for the access off Highway 10. They indicated that an approach permit with environmental checklist would be required to be submitted for review, and there might be some upgrades to them that might be needed. We have added a condition of approval for this project to require proof of an approved Department of Transportation approach permit prior to any building permit for this phase. Now getting into some of the review criteria for Bflr projects, first with impacts to physical environment. The property will be accessed off a private drive of Highway 10. There's no FEMA floodplain on the property. Property is outside of the air stagnation zone, but within impact zone M. That impact zone M relates to wood, stove, and fireplace restrictions during stage 2 air pollution warnings. The stormwater facilities on the property were constructed during the previous Bflr approval. The applicant is proposing to expand the detention pond to account for the additional runoff and use the natural slope of the site to direct any stormwater runoff into their stormwater piping and manholes. Now looking at impacts on the human population, this is the area where we address growth policy compliance. The property is designated as planned neighborhood in the 2019 land use element. That plan calls for a planned neighborhood to be defined as an area predominantly residential with small scale commercial in limited location. Commercial buildings should be sited along arterial or collector roads, providing clusters of limited activity with compatible intensity level, scale, and form of the adjacent neighborhood. Property owners within 300 feet of the buildings for lease to rent project were notified via mail, and we did not receive any comments from that mailing. And then just looking at the surrounding uses of the area, most properties surrounding the subject property are either vacant or residential in nature. Staff is recommending approval of the project subject to 2 conditions. First condition is that the submitted land use permit be in substantial compliance with the site plan submitted in the application. We allow for slight modifications due to any codes, specifically building codes, that might require not an increase in use, but just a slight reworking of buildings or location. And then also the aforementioned approval of a Montana Department of Transportation approach permit. So that is everything I have on my end. I do think that applicants, Sean with 406 Engineering, are here on the call, and I can hand it over to them.
And Nick, can you put the
Yeah. You want the site plan?
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, site plan.
Totally.
Yes, there we go.
Hey guys, it's Sean here at 406 Engineering. We're happy to answer any questions you guys have about the project. So, thank you.
Well, is there any comment on this? Any public comment? Looks like we'll close public comment and over to you, Dave.
Yeah, I actually have no questions. This seems pretty straightforward.
It's amazing, the need for RV, boat, and storage units. It's how quickly they've had to expand. I also don't really have any questions either, so thank you so much, Nick. We'll take a motion then.
All right. Without further ado, I move that the O'Keefe Creek Boat and RV Storage Expansion Buildings for Lease or Rent Project on Parcel 1B of Certificate of Survey 4074 as represented in the applicant packet be approved based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law found in the staff report subject to conditions of approval.
Second, any further comment? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Thanks,
And Sean?
everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Looks like we have Bailey Minnick with Bonner West Major Subdivision.
Yeah, let me get my screen set up here. Hold on one second. Takes a little while because I'm actually at home. Matt and Nick are in the office, but I'm working from home this week. So hopefully you guys can see my presentation. Did it pop up?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so this is the Bonner West subdivision. Let me get my screen moving here. So there's multiple addresses for this parcel because there's existing homes out there. But this is the general location. Let me turn on my laser pointer here. This is the location of the parcel. So it's about half a mile from the intersection of Highway 200 and Highway 10 between White House Lane and Cold Smoke Avenue. The Kettle House Amphitheater is in this location. And then obviously the Bonner Mill site is out here as well. The property is zoned residential R1, as you can see here in this yellow color, and there is a very small piece right here that is zoned heavy industrial or our CI2. And then the land use designations do correspond to that. So there is a small portion right here where the CI2 zoning is that is identified as heavy industrial center within our land use area, Missoula area land use element, as well as the neighborhood residential designation is what is in yellow. The neighborhood residential does have a dense recommended residential density of eight dwelling units per acre or greater. And there for the heavy industrial, there isn't a density, obviously because it's not residential proposed there, but they do recommend building sizes ranging from about 20,000 square feet to very large or over 150,000 square feet. So that does correspond to the mill site. So this is it's probably very tiny on your screen, but this is the proposed preliminary plat. So the project is 19 residential lots on 8.33 acres. The property is split by Highway 200 right here, if you can see it, with 3 lots here on, I call it the south, just because it's the lower portion of the plat, on the south, and then 16 lots here on the northern side. Each of these 19 lots does have an existing home that was constructed around 1925 as part of the Bonner Mill site development. And as part of the request, the applicant, and I'll get into this towards the end, but they are requesting 4 variances to the subdivision regulations, mainly regarding sidewalks and boulevards out there. So I'll go through our review criteria for subdivisions. I won't go into super in-depth on all of them, but there's just some highlights for each one. The proposed density of the subdivision is 2.2 0.27 dwellings per acre. The zoning designation in here, well, I guess while I'm talking, I'll leave the plat up so it's a little easier for you guys to see that. Just watch a blank screen. But the CR1 does have a maximum residential density, as I said, of 8 dwelling units per acre, with minimum lot sizes recommended of 5,400 square feet for single family, up to 8,000 square feet for 2-family. Based on these minimum lot sizes, the proposed lots are permitted for single family dwellings, but some of them could actually qualify for a 2-family dwelling just based on lot size. Obviously, we didn't look at setbacks or anything like that, but just off of the lot size, especially like this lot 1 obviously is really big at 24,000 square feet, but most of these ones are just big enough for a single family structure. The subdivision is located within our urban area of Missoula County. So it does have to qualify with our urban area road standards. As I said, direct access to the subdivision, there's actually 3 roads. You have Highway 200 here, you have White House Lane here, and then Cold Smoke Avenue is right off the side over here, and that's not actually on the property. So Cold Smoke Avenue and White House Lane are considered off-site access road, whereas Highway 200, because it divides the subdivision, is actually considered an on-site road. So the Highway 200 is within a state-maintained 60-foot public right-of-way easement. This is not actually fee-dedicated land that splits it. MDT did comment that they would not pursue acquiring the underlying right-of-way as fee simple property at this time as a condition. They're happy with just the easement as it stands right now. Mountain Line Bus System does currently use this common area here for the turnaround purposes. Trying to skip stuff, so it's not a lot of stuff. Since this is a major subdivision within the urban area, they are required to provide pedestrian facilities per our subdivision regulations. Those standards require sidewalks to be a minimum of 5 feet on both sides of the road and with minimum 7-foot wide boulevards. The existing sidewalks are currently less than 5 feet in width, and I'm talking about there's sidewalks existing along Highway 200, both the north and south side, as well as there are sidewalks along White House Lane. However, all of them are less than 5 feet. Let's see here. Our regulations do require non-motorized facilities or sidewalks to be extended across the entire street frontage of the subdivision. Currently, the existing sidewalk here on the north side of Highway 200, it actually ends right about here with this lot 16. It does not extend all the way. There's about 100 feet where it does not extend to the edge of the subdivision. And that's one of the variance requests that I'll talk about here in a little bit. We did receive comment from the health department recommending the applicant work with MDT to extend this sidewalk here from the edge up to Cold Smoke Avenue to provide a clear, safe pedestrian route. We also received comment from the MPO, or the Missoula Metropolitan Planning Organization, recommending coordination with Mountain Line for transit stops improvements. Surprisingly enough, Mountain Line had no comments, but the MPO also recommended providing the sidewalk extension to the common area to provide a continuous non-motorized access. And they also actually recommended an additional 5 feet of public access easement be required on both sides of Highway 200 to facilitate any future expansions of like bike lanes or sidewalk expansions, things like that. However, we're not recommending that as a condition at this time, mainly because MDT, as the owner of this easement out there, did not specify any additional comments or any desire for additional right-of-way at this time. The proposed lots are under 20 acres in size and therefore have to go through sanitation and subdivision review with the health department. The lots are connected to an existing multi-user and shared wastewater system. They're actually located here in this common area, and I believe there's replacements in this portion as well. There is an existing public water supply that does currently serve the property and does have adequate capacity to serve the subdivision. Because this is a major subdivision, they are required to provide a parkland dedication. The requirement is 11% of the area proposed for lots half an acre or smaller, and then 7.5% for any lots that are between half an acre and 1 acre. Based on the sizes of the lots, the total parkland dedication required for this subdivision is roughly half an acre, 0.5 acres. They're proposing a 0.24 acre private park right here at the edge of lot 16 and between 16 and Cold Smoke Avenue. And then the remaining 0.26 acres of parkland dedication would be provided as a cash in lieu dedication at the time of final plat. The intent of the private park is for open space for the residents of the subdivision and would be dedicated and maintained by the HOA that would be created with the subdivision. The private park does comply with our standards for parkland dedication, as it's an area that's bordered by streets or paths on 3 sides, is a site for active recreation, and does preserve the only available area within the subdivision that actually does not contain any existing infrastructure. So literally the only place left to put a park. The property is within the Missoula Rural Fire District. It's approximately 1 mile from the nearest fire station. It's actually the new station that just was built down there by the Bonner Mill site. Their fire hazard assessment did return a score of 22, which indicates a low risk for fire hazard out here on this property. The subdivision will utilize an existing fire suppression system that actually serves the Bonner Mill site. And that does include a large well and cistern located to the east of the subdivision. There are existing water mains and fire hydrants out there. And so we have, obviously, any additional hydrants would have to be reviewed and approved by the Missoula Rural Fire District. There was comment received from the fire district that supported the fire suppression system. And we've had no additional comments that were received during our review. That was submitted, or the applicant contacted Missoula Rural prior to submitting their application. We also received comment from the State Historic Preservation Office identifying these existing structures because they're over 50 years old, that basically if any structures are altered, they recommend that SHPO is contacted to determine any cultural resource inventory that would be needed at that time. And so before any alteration or demolition of structures, just to, I believe, and Dan might be able to get into this a little bit more, but really just to make sure if there's any cultural significance of some of these buildings that's recorded for future knowledge and history of it. The property, obviously, it is within the Blackfoot River corridor, so there is a wide range of animal species that are known to be in this area, but we didn't receive any comments from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on any wildlife concerns. And obviously, as I said, it is existing out there. You know, the impacts have already been established in this subdivision. So now I will go into the variances, and I have pictures here for you guys to see. So they're, as I said, requesting 4 variances. Really, it's the same it's the same section for 2 roads. You have Highway 200 and White House Lane. So they're really the same variances over and over again. We're recommending approval of 3 of them, and I am recommending denial of 1 of them. So I'll go over the one recommending denial first. So this is the requirement that non-motorized facilities be extended along the entire frontage of the subdivision. So as I mentioned, the existing sidewalk ends right about here. So we're discussing this portion right here in front of the common area. The applicant is requesting to deviate from the standard due to requirements of sidewalk construction within the MDT right-of-way. There is some slight topography in this area, and so there was concerns about potentially having to install a handrail if that could violate setbacks. We don't feel that that would, a handrail isn't considered a structure, so it wouldn't trigger setback requirements as far as zoning is concerned. But without the side, oh, yeah. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, just sorry to butt in here, just for clarification on the layout here. So the common area appears to be set back from I mean, all the other lots go clear out to the sidewalk. What's the status of that strip of land there that's encircled in red between the existing roadway and the designated common area?
Yeah, Dan might be able to help with that too. My understanding is I believe it is another, it's just an easement. I believe, or there is MDT right-of-way easement that extends across this. But Dan might have more understanding. That I would say that's been my one question as far as extending this. Obviously MDT, it's on the highway, but if any other property owner, who actually would have to agree to this as well. Dan, do you have anything? I know to jump you into the middle of my presentation.
Yeah, no problem. Dan Foltz with IMEG here. That is MDT right-of-way easement in that area, so definitely permission from MDT. And then it's surveyed and described as Tract 1 of COS 6307. And recently, this is also known as Bonner Mountain, and recently the mill site, which is a different LLC than the applicant here, but they also own this property now. So I think that would clear up any concern of other property rights, private owners have interest in that. But it definitely, the concern is we do have to work with MDT to install facilities there, and they would actually own those facilities, is my current understanding.
Okay, I mean, the basis for my, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dave, sorry.
Well, the basis for my question is just why the common area lot is not
Flush.
yeah, the southern border doesn't match up with any of the other lots, and so who owns in fee that chunk, that small piece, which is, I don't know how many feet between there, and if you were just to extrapolate out the sidewalk to the east. Yeah, basically right in there. I mean, I understand that there's an easement or a right of way for MDT, but I'm just curious who actually owns that ground. You can think about it. It just not
yeah.
to derail the conversation here.
I think, if my understanding correct, is that it is in the easement, right-of-way easement, but it is owned currently by Bonner Property Development LLC, which is also owned by Steve Nelson.
Okay. Fair enough. Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, so to finish this variance, basically we are recommending denial of this. We would like them to extend that sidewalk just so the private park has safe and adequate access for all homeowners residing within this. As I said, this is for their Parkland dedication requirements, and so to have that sidewalk end before the private park, you just want to make sure that there's adequate and safe access for everyone at this location.
Wait, Bailey, so maybe I'm not getting this. So if the sidewalk is required to go where your cursor is through all the way to the east side of the common area, would that's Steve Clausen's property, or are you guys saying that it's MDT's property and MDT has to approve that sidewalk?
Well, MDT has an easement, so they have an easement. Like, I think of it kind of like an onion, right? You have the private property, and then you have an easement on top of it. I know I use onions for every zoning required example, but it really is like you have, the underlying landowner, right, is Steve, but MDT has an easement, and they say if you're going to do any work within our easement, you have to get a permit to do it, and so therefore they really are kind of the overarching jurisdiction, right, that says what you can and can't do within their easement area. But obviously the underlying landowner would, want to be involved as well, which seems like it's the same people doing the subdivision. So there shouldn't be any issues with that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate to interject too much because you might be getting to this later, Dan, but again, just to beat the dead horse a little bit more, there must be something in mind for future use of this little tiny strip that's going to remain in the ownership of Steve, because otherwise it would seem to make sense just to expand the common area all the way to match the southern border of the other properties and decrease the amount of cash in lieu that would need to be paid out. Unless, of course, like I say, there's some advantage to Steve hanging on to
That sliver.
an 8-foot wide sliver or something south of the common area.
Yeah, I think too, one of the things, Dave, is like this piece is not part of the subdivision. So this is how the tract has been existing. Like to do what you're saying to extend this boundary line to here would have taken like a boundary line adjustment or something prior to doing this. So that is kind of one of the things we're dealing with, these existing tracts that don't really follow, you know, they're really old, so they don't follow what they should follow if it was in a perfect world.
So the
Okay.
sidewalk is going to continue straight to the east, or is it going to angle towards where the common area? I mean, if you stay on that sidewalk, how do you get to the common area?
That
I was gonna say if
that's
Dan could answer that question.
that's a good question, and we don't have a design for that yet, and most of that is going to be driven by what MDT wants to do there. I guess one thing I will bring up is just like the sidewalk that's in front of all these other lots, with the actual property line being in the center of Highway 200, MDT actually owns and maintains those sidewalks in the frontage, right? And so it's I think this sidewalk will be the same. As far as access to the common area, I don't think that should be a concern regardless of where the sidewalk lands, because there is a public right-of-way easement there. So I don't think that'll be a concern. As far as like topography and how that is eventually going to be designed, I think Bailey has in her condition of approval, if the sidewalk does go into the, you know, common area P or that private park, we would have to put an easement over it to allow the public to walk through that. So I think, but as far as like the exact location of that, whether it'll just continue along the frontage or be set back a little bit, we don't know that answer yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's surprising that MDT owns and at least is in theory responsible for maintaining the sidewalk. Huh. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Since we've kind of, as Dave said, beat a dead horse, I'm going to go to the next variance. I'll skip this one and go to the next one. Hopefully here, if I can get my slide to progress. Okay. So yeah, so this one, so that first one we were recommending denial. The applicant was requesting not to do the sidewalk extension. We are requesting denial because we want them to do the sidewalk extension. This one we are recommending approval of the request. So we're agreeing with the applicant just for clarification purposes. It's basically the same section. The existing sidewalk ends right here. If you see it in my picture, the requirement would be to have this sidewalk extend all the way to here to the edge of the property. We are recommending approval mainly because there is an existing access here. Again, as I mentioned, Mountain Line does use this to turn around their buses for I can't remember what number it is, but one of their more popular lines. And so really the extension of the sidewalk in this location, you know, there's no existing residential homes past here. It actually would potentially encourage more vehicle and pedestrian safety concerns by doing it. So we don't see a necessity or a reason to extend this. So therefore we are recommending approval of this variance request as well. And then the last two variants, and I'm kind of skipping over them or going, I can go into more criteria if you guys, but I'm just giving you the highlights. So this one is regarding White House Lane, the sidewalk here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the sidewalks are less than 5 feet in width. So they don't meet our current standards, and therefore they need variances to maintain them. So they don't, obviously they don't want to rip out those sidewalks and install new sidewalks just to meet an additional, I think they're between 4 and 4.5 feet existing. So to get an extra 6 inches to, mess with them out there, they're asking for variances to that. We are recommending approval of the one regarding White House Lane, but with a condition. There are some sections, and it seemed to be more up in this area, where some of the existing sidewalk is has some cracks and some I feel like there was one that was like a little bit offset, or just kind of just some movements of the ground, and some of the existing curb that is crumbling in certain areas. So we would like them to go in and repair those areas and maintain them. The developer has agreed to that, but we did recommend a condition of approval that does state they will go in and fix those issues to maintain the existing sidewalk at this location. And then the same being for just the overall sidewalks that are existing on both sides of Highway 200 that are, again, less than 5 feet. They have to ask for a variance to that. These sidewalks, I didn't notice any repairs or anything that were needed. They seemed in pretty good shape. And it does, there was some comment from MDT. They do have this area as part of a future road project here coming in. I think it's fiscal year 2023, and they are proposing to do some maintenance to the sidewalks out here, mainly dealing with this crosswalk location and some ADA ramps and things like that. So again, it seemed kind of silly to have them rip out existing sidewalks that are in good shape to extend for 6 inches, especially when MDT is going to come back and do some more work as well. And again, MDT had no comments on the project or anything. So we are recommending approval of this variance as well. This is just a highlight of, again, the agency comments that I had gone over in my report. We did publish the legal ad in the paper. We notified adjacent landowners. I placed a poster on the property. No comments have been received from any neighbors or anyone in the county regarding this project. The planning board did meet on January 4th and heard the request. Again, no public attended or no comments were provided. The board did discuss amending my recommended condition number 10, and that was to remove the requirement for the issuance of that encroachment permit from MDT prior to final plat. We reviewed the process for encroachment permits, the timeline of the subdivision, the need for the homes to be on the market quickly to get this. I mean, it's existing. It's a very unique circumstance where all of the lots are existing homes that are out there. So ultimately, the planning board did recommend consistently with staff's proposal on the variances. So again, the one for denial, the other 3 for approval. And then they amended the main motion to amend that condition 10 to remove the encroachment permit requirement prior to final plat. So this is the proposed condition. It was included as the end of my planning board summary. But basically just taking out, and we made it very clear that, all other permits are necessary. Anything that needs to happen for that sidewalk other than just the encroachment permit is not required prior to filing the final plat. And some of my understanding is they had talked about at planning board that they may do a subdivision improvement agreement for the sidewalk extension to help facilitate, which is allowed under our regulations. They can do that to help facilitate this going towards final plat quickly. So I have 4 motions for each of the variances. And then the final one that we are recommending approval subject to the conditions of approval as amended by the planning board. And I don't know, Dan, if you had more to add, or if commissioners, do you have more questions with this?
No, we'll kick it to IMEG and Steve and Mike. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Bailey. Really thorough presentation. It's been an exciting project. It's pretty unique. I don't know that anybody on this call has seen a subdivision of everything existing. So that's been been interesting to work through. And I think planning staff did a really good job kind of guiding us through the process because it is a little unique. Steve and Mike are here from Bonner Homes West LLC to answer any questions you have if I can't. But the purpose of the subdivision is to take these rental units that have been all under one ownership and divide them so that they could be sold to individual, members of the public. So my understanding is they will be offered to the existing renters first at market value with no competition. And then after that, put on the open market. And I know Stephen and Mike might have a better idea, but last I heard there was at least 5 or 6 of the people that reside here and rent here that are interested in purchasing. So our goal is to try to get this plat finalized as soon as possible in order to help that out. And I think the way that we're going to approach that is through the subdivision improvements agreement with the county. So, and that's all I have unless you guys have questions.
Thanks, Dan. Mike or Steve, do you want to add anything?
I don't really have anything. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay, is there any public comment? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Dave?
Yeah, Mike, Dan, Steve, whoever is familiar with the property there, I can't remember when were all the parcels on the other side of the road that also are residences divvied up into individual lots? Has that been from the very beginning, or did that happen at some point in the past also?
So Dave,
you want to handle it, Dan?
I think I can. Yeah, and Steve definitely has more history than I do, but all of those parcels are depicted in a retracement survey. And I believe the year of that, I'm looking right now. Oh gosh, that was in 2008. But it was based on surveyors at Territorial Landworks, the mill, and the county attorney's understanding that those were in fact tracts of record for a very long time. Now, the particular year I'm not aware of, but maybe Steve or Mike, you do know that year.
I don't know the year. I just know that when those houses were, I think Mr. Cooney had purchased those houses back in like 2008 or 2009, and then Mike Seystead was the deputy county attorney, I think, at the time, and that's how it came about. So they've always been on separate lots ever since we've owned them. Okay.
Yeah, I figured it probably had been the case, but thanks for that. Question, Bailey. So I'm assuming it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that the Bonner Milltown Community Council had been contacted on your distribution list, and you didn't receive any public comment.
Yep, they were part of the agency comment during sufficiency review, and yeah, I didn't have anything received or anything like that. I don't know if Dan had reached out, if you guys reached out to them separately during like the neighborhood meeting. Since it's a major, they did have to do a neighborhood meeting. And I'm assuming, I think you guys did at the same time.
Yeah, we actually did our neighborhood meeting with the community council, and they were in full support and really thought it was a great project and would help the neighborhood, as home ownership tends to provide a more vibrant neighborhood than rentals. So, yep.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, nor do I. So are you ready for a motion?
Well, was there any public comment?
Oh, thanks. Just got excited. It's 3:15 and moving along here. So yes,
no, you opened it and closed it, but I don't know if anybody else is out there. It was pretty fast, but you did do it, Renita. You're good.
Thanks, Bailey.
Okay. I guess we've covered that base. Bailey, can you make this a little bit bigger? I'm having trouble seeing my screen here right now.
Let me go back and do the presentation. I had just the screen up, but I had closed it. Let me do it because it takes my whole screen. Hold on a second. Because yeah, I do have a motion for each of the variances and then the final one for the actual subdivision. Hopefully this works. Is that better for you, Dave?
Yes, that is acceptable. Okay. So let's roll through this. So I would move that the request to vary from section 3.4.9.1C requiring existing non-motorized facilities be extended along the entire frontage of the subdivision on the north side of Highway 200 be denied. You want me to do
Second.
all of these? You want to do them individually, Juanita, or?
Can we do them all at once, Bailey? John Hart, can we do these all at once?
You can do them all at once.
Great. Go ahead, Dave.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, unless you're planning on voting against one of these, I'll just read it all together and make it in one fell swoop. Okay, number 2, that the request to vary from section 3.4.9.1.C requiring existing non-motorized facilities be extended along the entire frontage of the subdivision on the south side of Highway 200 be approved. And that the request to vary from section 3.4.7.3 requiring all roads within the urban area to contain a conventional curb, gutter, and boulevard sidewalk specific to White House Lane be approved with the recommended condition of approval. And that the request to vary from section 3.4.7.3 requiring all roads within the urban area to contain a conventional curb, gutter, and boulevard sidewalk specific to Highway 200 be approved. And finally, that the Bonner West subdivision be approved based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report as amended by the planning board. Second. Any further comment? Well, I will just say that this makes a great deal of sense, and I have no doubt that to the casual observer, they're probably assuming these are already homes on individual lots, and I think just given the housing context in Missoula, this makes a tremendous amount of sense to get these on individual platted lots. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Gina Miller are we opening our first amended ordinance adopting Missoula City County Health Code and related fees?
That is what I'm here to talk with you about today. So that's kind of a gear shift from what you guys have been diving into this afternoon. But I know it's been a long meeting, so I'll be brief and feel free to stop me at any point with questions. I also see Anna on the phone if your questions kind of bleed into the territory of House Bill 121 or the intricacies therein. So a little bit about that. Really, the reason I'm here today to talk about adopting updated health code fees by reference is because of a recent change at the legislature. House Bill 121, you may remember, changed the process for adopting or amending local ordinances, health ordinances specifically. So last summer, the BCC adopted the entire health code and the fees at that time by reference in order to comply with that new state law. And so more specifically today, we're here because the Board of Health in October adopted updated health code fees as proposed by staff. Updating fees is something we do periodically. So before I get too far into the kind of the specific changes to that ordinance that adopted the code and fees by reference, I'll give a little bit of context on the reason for the updated fees. Like I said, adjusting fees is something we do from time to time to keep pace with increasing costs of living and staff salary increases. most of the fee increases that were recently adopted by the Board of Health were actually increased in 2019. And a lot has happened since 2019. Most impactful here in environmental health is there's a significant increase in our services, especially those related to property development. So that's things like evaluating sites for development, water and wastewater specifically, reviewing subdivisions, issuing permits, inspecting wells and septic systems upon installation. So it became really obvious to us that if we were to continue providing a great public service and even just keeping up with our obligations, we were going to have to increase staffing. So that really is the impetus behind these updated fees. So I'm going to share my screen quickly to show you this is, I believe, in the information that you have, but I'm going to show you the fees that are changing. One moment. Oh, geez. 2 years into it, I should be quicker, but I can do this.
All good.
Okay. So let me make this a little bit bigger. These were adopted October 21st by the Board of Health, as I mentioned. So over here's the service that is being the service for which the fee is being increased. So
Hey,
things
Gina,
like
can you make it just a hair bigger than that even?
yes, I absolutely can. Let me how's that, Dave?
That's better. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Thanks.
So these are the proposed increases, excuse me, the adopted increases that are proposed to be adopted by reference. Again, not going to go into each one line by line, but what I do want to do is just give a little bit of background on the way the Environmental Health Division looks at fees and the method that we use to evaluate when an increase is probably needed and what that increase should be. So, you know, we recognize that there's lots of methods that people or other agencies might use or subscribe to when it comes to raising service fees. For example, maybe a predictable % increase on a regular interval, or some organizations just use cost of living. But the way we prefer to look at fees in environmental health is by evaluating like a full programmatic cost and then comparing it to the revenue generated from that particular service or program. That allows us to kind of take a really hard look at what portion or percentage of each individual program is covered by fees, and then thus what percentage is covered by local tax dollars. And so I will bring up just one example. I'm not going to go through all of these spreadsheets, but it will give you an idea of the thought process that we use. And I know I'm going to have to make this bigger as well, so I will do that. So we break down each one of our programs and we take a look at our programmatic costs. Our biggest cost, this is a very big program. This is septic and well permitting and inspections. This is one of our biggest programs. We have a lot of staff time, a lot of resources. It covers all of these program elements. So it's compliance, responding to complaints, training new and existing staff, looking at variances, writing the permits, interacting with the public, answering all those questions. This is a big chunk of our time. We also take a look at our budgetary expenses and try to define what portion of those budgetary expenses, like our computers and our cars, could be attributed to this program. And then we take a look at the revenue based on current fees. And so the summary is where we can kind of break down the % that's covered by fees versus the % that's covered by local taxes. And that's right here. And if I were to go through each one of these, you would see that this is not, we don't try to hit a specific number or be equal across all programs. And that's because While there is, well, each of these programs benefits everybody in the county in a number of ways. Some of the programs really are more widespread. For instance, septic and well permitting, that is a program that is accessible and utilized for the most part by any person who's not on municipal or public systems. We have a lot of interaction with folks who are on on-site systems. On the other hand, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't think anyone was saying anything, sorry.
Oh, I'm hearing things. Forget that then. On the other hand, we might have a program, for example, groundwater monitoring, where the property owner really is the beneficiary of that service. It's somebody who almost every time is in a position where they are looking to increase use, so add a second dwelling or perhaps subdivide the property. And so we try to acknowledge that should be a program that's more heavily covered by service fees rather than by tax dollars. And so
yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so in the case at hand here, so for instance, if you could scroll back up there, Gina, just a little bit. So yeah, so the 65% covered by local taxes, is there for each of this kind of service areas that you're looking at, is there a target percentage that you are wanting covered by the public at large versus the individual property owner or applicant?
That's such a good question. And the simple answer is no, we don't have necessarily established targets for each program area. There's just a lot of fluctuation in program costs and sanitarian salaries and what our operations costs are. The fee revenue, we have a little more control over, I suppose. But it's also fairly unpredictable, and it's very much based on development cycles. And so rather than having a set target that we try to adjust to or kind of be flexible toward each year, or every time, not each year, I guess, every time we revise fees, we take a look at where we are and we discuss it, and we take a look at what that service is providing to the community and even more specifically the neighborhood. And 50% is something that we talk about a lot, like maybe more than half of certain programs should be covered by fees and less than half should be covered by local taxes. But this one that I have up right here is an example of one where we feel very okay having more than half covered by local taxes, and that's not true of all of them. But again, the short answer to your question is no, we don't have established goals for each one of these fee line items.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm just trying to game out what the methodology is in terms of figuring out if you're going to adjust the fees. It's easy enough to understand if our position is that 50%, 65%, whatever the percentage is, should be borne by the public versus the private property owner or applicant, and then you end up adjusting the dollars, just kind of shake out where they shake out based on the percentage versus. I guess I just still don't quite understand the methodology by which the change is being determined.
Because each one's so unique, each kind of permit or action is.
Well, and it could be a different percentage for each type of permit or action. But it's not sounding like that is, you're not coming up with target percentages for each of these. It's just you're adjusting the dollar figure and the percentage then ends up being floating.
We're adjusting the dollar percentage, and it might help if no, that's fine. I'll stay on this screen. These fees are not being increased by commensurate percentages either. So for example, our certified septic installers test is going up by a very, very small percentage, whereas our site evaluation percentage increase is much larger, closer to a 30% increase. And that's because we're looking at all kinds of things, not just what we found out, honestly, that with staff increases and increase in demand, the program is costing us, because that is something that, is not static or even linear. But we take a look at where we are. In this case, we were at 65%, and we want to adjust fees in a way that's not shocking to people. So if we had target percentages, if we said, well, we want the septic and well permitting program to hit 45% covered by local taxes or whatever that might be, the only way we can get there might be to raise fees by something like 40%. And we recognize that that's probably not the right way to get there all in one fell swoop. That would be pretty shocking to folks that get a lot of septic permits. So we try to be very reasonable with our fee increases. We know that the information that's out there is that smaller incremental fee increases more frequently is more palatable to customers, rather than just taking a look at where you're at programmatically and having a big jump. But again,
do you want to show the fee schedule? Would that be easier for people to see the?
I would be happy to do that. Bring it up. Oh gosh. I gotta move it over here and then I will share it. Is that up now?
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know, is this helpful? To kind of see the difference?
Well, it's yes and no. It's still a little bit obscure what goes into this. I have no doubt that there's a method to the madness here, but the increases are, as you suggested, Gina, they're not. It's not like you're applying a 2.5% increase to everything across the board, nor are you apparently basing this off of a percentage of subsidy from the public on these, but some combination of all of that. Because yeah, if costs skyrocket, then maybe you don't want to maintain the same percentage of private responsibility versus public investment that you would otherwise. But what I'm gathering is there's a little bit of science and there's a little bit of art involved here, perhaps.
I would definitely agree with that statement. There is science and there is art, and there are a whole lot of plugins to this evaluation. And there also are significant reasons that are right in front of us for raising the fees. Raising fees is something that we have always done, but raising fees right now is related to a pretty unprecedented spike in demand on our services for this team. And we, in conjunction with an increase in salary for the folks that are doing this work, because we are having a hard time retaining and keeping people. So we have to hire more people to keep up with the demand on our services. Raising fees is part of that. And so we're balancing, 100 things probably in looking at each one of these line items, trying to be reasonable and not shocking to folks who work with these fees a lot, kind of stay reasonable for an individual property owner who wants to develop and has to come get permits. We don't want those to be astronomical, but we also do have an obligation to keep serving the public, and we need more people to do that.
Shannon, Terrio, you had your hand up, but then took it down. I wasn't sure.
Yes, I mean, part of what I was just gonna say is that it's the reason we use this is also to make it really clear that these are supported by public dollars. And there is definitely a countywide public benefit to it, but it's to show that these fees don't cover all the cost, and it's expensive to do the work local government does. So that's another reason that we do that. But Dave, I think that you captured it really well when you said there's science and there's art to it, and there's all the things that you guys are talking about is what goes into our deliberations when we're looking at it.
And I think that's important what you just said, Shannon, in terms of there are clear public benefits to these services being delivered, and
Yeah.
we just have to come to terms with it's okay that at some level we're all chipping in that this happens, even though from a different vantage point you might say, well, some individual property owners is getting a free ride here by virtue of the rest of us. Well, if we didn't do our due diligence, there would be community consequences in some cases.
Absolutely. So if we're ready, I'll kind of shift away from the numbers and quickly bring up the actual proposal. And I have a clean copy here. I think you guys also have a copy of this. Hope. Nope. That is not the right one. Let me go over here. I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay. So making this larger, this is the clean copy of the first amended ordinance. So this is the resolution and ordinance that was adopted last summer with, I've highlighted in yellow the things that have changed to show you guys that this really changed the date for the most current version of adopted health code fees. Talks a little bit about what we did today at this public meeting. And then House Bill 121 requires that the information that we discussed today be made available to the public for a period of at least 30 days. And we do that by, I have a memo and the actual fee sheet to file, all ready to go to file at the clerk and recorder to make it available to the public. And after 30 days, so you'll see me again in about a month for a second reading after we give some time for anybody who's interested to perhaps submit comment. And then we will have a second reading of this proposed First Amendment. And another thing I want to recognize is that, of course, I drafted this last year, so I'm going to have to change the signature block as well from the one that you folks got in your packet today. And just related to public comment, we did an extensive public comment opportunity when we put these forth to the Board of Health. Looks like we sent it to 350 individuals, including anyone who had subscribed as an interested party and all of our certified septic installers and approved site evaluators for whom we have email addresses. We got 3 reply emails, and none of them were opposed to these fees. Some people asked some good questions, and the 3 people that commented were generally supportive. I should have had a beautiful proposed motion PowerPoint slide, but it's fairly simple. The proposed motion today is to adopt the updated health code fees by reference. And if you have questions about process, I would direct those to Anna. And if you don't, that's all I have.
So if the public comment period's still open, is it premature to make a motion today?
It's motioning to open it, right?
Is that what we're doing?
I think you preliminarily adopt today, and then you finally adopt in the subsequent hearing. That will be scheduled.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, before any motions are made, is there any public comment on this? Okay, not hearing any. Oh, Dan?
Yeah, I might be a little biased here, but I definitely support the fee increase and any opportunity the development community has to work with the local health department. I think by and large, it's a better experience than working at the state level. So by having adequate and educated local staff that can review some projects and assist in some projects for review is a big asset to the community. So just wanted to get that on record.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, not hearing you. Oh, Anna? Okay, yeah, Dave, do you have a motion?
Well, I guess,
Comment, questions?
no comments. This is all good, and I agree wholeheartedly that showing the fee schedule and showing that there's public investment in this is super important, because more often than not, I really appreciate that feedback, Dan, but more often than not, what we hear is that our fees are exorbitant and an impediment to accomplishing anything in the community. And the reality is that we ought to see this as this is actually, through the public investment that we're making, one way in which we are actually helping get work done that otherwise would be even more expensive if the individual applicants were bearing the full price, and that is not what's happening. So with that, as far as a motion goes.
Dave, just so you're clear, and what we're doing as we make sense of HB 121 is we're using the process that we use for county ordinances for this process of the county commission adopting health board recommended changes to the health code and fees, just so that, because we're essentially having you all bless it under your authority, you're basically lawmaking authority in the county. We're just following that same process, and that process requires an initial adoption, an open public comment period, and then a final adoption. And Gina, this is the first time this is before the commission, correct? So the motion would be to initially adopt the recommended fees. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is the first time, and I appreciate your help and Shannon's guidance as well. HB 121 is not easy for me to parse through, and I might not get all the terminology right, but this is the initial reading adoption by reference. Yes.
Okay, so I would move that we preliminarily adopt the first amended ordinance adopting Missoula City County Health Code and related fees by reference.
Okay.
If that's, does that work? Anna?
That's pure poetry, Dave.
It really, yeah. Well done, Dave. Second, any further public comment? All in favor? Aye. Thanks so much, Gina and Anna, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Look forward to the encore performance here in a little bit.
Would you say when in February?
It's got to be 30 days from now, so toward the end. Oh, gosh,
Okay.
even early March.
Oh. Oh goodness, that was it. Any other business? Okay.
Snuck up on us.
It did. Okay, we're adjourned then. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.